All right. All right. Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. So today, I just need to lose fat around my belly. If I do enough ab work, that fat will come off. We've heard that, right? If you've heard that, thumbs up in the chat, put a comment in the chat. But that's the myth we're going to, or maybe it's true, that we're going to cover today in the episode. Whether or not you can reduce fat in a specific area by doing strength training in that specific area, right? And the most common one we hear is around the abs. So in other words, hey, I'm going to do some crunches and a bunch of crunches, and that's going to burn the fat specifically in my stomach area, and that's where I want the fat gone. So yeah, so I've heard it. I believed it at one time. I mean, it's totally a thing, right? Like it makes sense, and I wish it was true, absolutely, but it makes sense why people believe that, right? It's burning there, so it must be burning the fat there, right? So that's why people do believe it. That's one of the big reasons they believe it, is because they can feel the burning in that muscle, right? The lactic acid building up in the muscle that they're exercising. So that must be burning the fat in that area. Also, I remember, maybe it's because I'm an old man, but I remember this old video clip, and I should have looked this up to see what it was from, but I don't know, some of y'all might remember. There's like this black and white video clip of this band around this guy's waist, and it's on this machine, and it's just shaking the crap out of him. I don't know if y'all remember that, but it's like basically shaking him all around the ab area. And that was the premise of that machine's invention, was to burn or reduce the fat around the stomach, because that's the common complaint. You don't hear a lot of people say, I guess maybe they do say, hey, I wish I had less fat around my triceps, maybe around my inner thighs, things like that. But really the belly is the one, and that's, personally speaking, that's where I put fat on the most, is around that midsection, right? That's where a concentration of my fat cells kind of exist. And, it's an emotional thing, right? It affects what we wear, what we see in the mirror when we look in the mirror. It affects all those things. So it's very personal. And I think the people that are asking about this question that I get, which is, can I burn fat around this area? I think the reason they ask is because, they're frustrated. They want to lose that midsection fat area. So let's first talk about the research. Okay, so there's actually been quite a bit of studies in this area to see if this spot reduction of fat is a real thing. So I'm going to call out a couple studies here, and I'm going to put all these studies in the description of the video. So if you want to read them, you're more than welcome to do that. But one study, it was in 1971 by Gwinnett, and it was a study of tennis players, and essentially they were looking at the dominant arm of the tennis player versus the non-dominant arm of competitive tennis players. And they wanted to kind of measure them and see, and essentially the fat thickness of each of those arms was the same. And so if you think about it, like if it were true that if you exercise a muscle, you will be leaner around that muscle, then those tennis players' dominant arms should have had less subcutaneous fat, or under the skin fat, subcutaneous under the skin fat, than the non-dominant arm. And that was not the case. They were both the same. So that's one of them. The one that I mentioned in my teaser clip that hopefully you saw and drew you into this video, I work very hard on those teaser clips, and I tried a new thing today, or yesterday. I took it from my car, so a little different. Different atmosphere. Jake on the go. I'd just gotten a haircut, so I felt like I looked presentable, so I did that. But anyway, this is the one I mentioned in the teaser, which was the sit-up study. This was in 1984 by Catch, I believe it is Katch, and essentially it was 13 men total. They trained for 27 days, and essentially what they did was they made them do a series of sit-ups over time, and it ended up being 5,004 total sit-ups. I said it was over 5,000. It was actually 5,004. And they actually biopsied the fat cells in the abdomen, the upper back, and in the glutes, or in the booty, right? So they basically measured it from the train site. That'd be the abdomen, so because they were doing ab crunches. They tested it from the upper back, which, men, I think it's mainly men, maybe women too, but I noticed for me, even when I'm very lean, my back, upper back and lower back still have a decent amount of subcutaneous fat on them, under the skin fat. So they biopsied it. So they stuck a needle in there and they drew out the fat cells in the ab area where they exercised, and then the upper back and the glute area. And essentially, the fat cells decreased significantly in all three of the areas. So even though they were doing the ab crunches, it actually used up fat, or fat reduced, in all three areas. So if it were true that the spot reduction method of doing like an ab crunch will lower or will tone your abs, that's probably the most common thing you've heard, then what should have happened was the fat cells in their abdomen should have been smaller, or it should have been smaller than the ones in their upper back and glute area. And notice I said size, right? Because these fat cells, they don't go away unless you get liposuction. They only shrink in size. And so that's why, that whoosh effect that I've talked about in some of my other videos is because those fat cells are still there, but they fill full of water. And then when you get that whoosh effect, they shrink, and that's what causes you to have that weight loss on the scale. So it's kind of interesting how that works. But yeah, as the fat cells shrink, or they get burned up or used, the energy inside of them gets used, they shrink. But before they do that, they draw water in. Anyway, small tangent. But that was the sit-up study. There's also a single leg study done. This was more recent, 2013, by Ramirez and Campillo. It's one of the two. But essentially, they had 11 people that trained their non-dominant leg only 3 times a week, for 960 to 1,200 leg press reps per session at a very light load. Even at a light load, that's a lot of reps. 1,200 reps, that's horrible. In fact, I had a brutal leg workout with my my workout partner Dylan at Texas Iron yesterday. He put me through an old school workout that I haven't done in probably 20 years, which was he was either 9 or 10 sets of squats to failure, every one of them. That was brutal. Yeah, I'm not walking too well today, Dylan. Thanks a lot for that, dude. Appreciate that. Anyway, so they exercised their non-dominant leg only and left the dominant leg the same, and they did these leg press high reps, low weight. And then they did DEXA scans before and after. So a DEXA scan is essentially you lay on a table, and there's a it's almost like a paper scanner that runs like the beam of light across the paper and back. You kind of feel like that. You're laying on this table, and this it uses the radiation, but it's like goes up and down your body, or it might just go down your body. I can't remember, but it's very accurate. In fact, it's one of the most accurate ways of determining body composition, next to an MRI scan. I think MRI is the most accurate. There's also water displacement testing, I think. I don't know where that falls between DEXA and whatnot, but DEXA scans, I probably should talk about them at some point in the future. If you have questions about DEXA scans, put them in the chat, and we can maybe talk about it during the Q&A. But basically, they used a DEXA scan before they trained and after. So before the experiment and then after the experiment ran. And there was no significant fat loss in the trained leg. Fat loss showed up actually in the upper body instead. So that further disproves the spot reduction theory, because what should have happened was the non-dominant leg should have been leaner, less fat than the dominant leg or anywhere else, but instead they lost it off their torso. So not even in the area they were exercising, they lost fat. So basically the reason why is because fat, it's not burned where it sits, right? It doesn't get eaten up by the muscle below it, right? That's not the way it works. Instead, it gets mobilized, right? So the contents of the fat cells get released out of the fat cells into the bloodstream as fatty acids, and then those fatty acids get used as energy whenever you need them. And that could be fat from your legs, etc., torso, etc. So it's really, think of it like a bank account, right? So you decide basically how much comes out, but not necessarily what bank, banks have your money kind of everywhere, but you don't get to really pick what bank it comes out of, right? You just get your money out of the ATM. So it doesn't really work like we hope it would, which was basically exercise the abs and I'll lose it off the abs. It doesn't work that. There was actually there's some nuance to this. There was a study actually that it was a meta-analysis where they took multiple studies and kind of looked at them again and combined the data, et cetera. But I think, that study specifically, let me see if I can find which one it was. Yeah, it was the Brobican study of 2023. It's Hoff, Wang, Helgerode, Grogster, and Brobican. I'm slaughtering probably 50% of their names. But basically, the study was called Abdominal Aerobic Endurance Exercise Reveals Spot Reduction Exists, a random control trial. But the problem with this is it was a very small sample size, and they were also doing non-strength training exercise. So they were doing cardio. And so they had them do crunches, but they also looked at doing cardio. And so they did show some trunk fat loss, but they're doing cardio, right? So it's not an apples to apples. So that study, in my opinion, kind of doesn't really line up there. So what's my verdict on this thing? Is it enough to do ab work and your fat will come off? No, it's a rethink it on this one. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I wish it was true. I wish I could, do chest press and then burn all the fat out of my pecs and carry a little bit of fat everywhere else. I wish it was like that, but it doesn't work that way. At the end of the day, your body has an energy bank, and that is in fats, sugar, glucose, and muscle. It can use all those things for energy, right? Glucose through, metabolizing that, using proteins or breaking down muscle and other proteins called gluconeogenesis. So that's turning basically protein into glucose or into an energy substrate to use. And then it can use fats too. And that's, the keto people that don't eat any carbs. I mean, essentially they're using a lot of ketogenesis and a lot of fats for energy. And your body is very good at adapting to using any of those energy sources. But at the end of the day, it's all about energy in, energy out, which is what I've been talking about time and time again on this channel. It's believe me, I've tried the other methods of not believing that a calorie doesn't count, but they do count. And so if you're taking in more energy than you're expelling, you will gain weight. If you're taking in less energy than you're expelling, then you will lose weight. And food gets processed by our body and turned into energy. So the more food you eat and the less energy you use, that will net in a weight gain. It's just as simple as that, unfortunately. And as far as how to get fat off those areas, the really frustrating thing about it is you don't get to pick where the fat comes off, unfortunately. For me, just speaking personally for me, and everybody's different about where they carry their fat and where their fat comes off first and last. I've been very lean. Next year, I will get even leaner when I enter my first bodybuilding competition. I've been down to what the DEXA scan showed as 7%. And so that could be anywhere from 5 to 10% with the margin of error. I probably think I was more close to 9%, honestly. But I'm going to get down to 3 to 4% next year for my competition, which is, it's going to be tough, but we're going to do it. We're going to get that done. Sorry, honey. I have to apologize to my wife in advance. But yeah, we're going to get that done. But whenever I've gotten the leanest that I've gotten, which was around 7% DEXA verified, basically the way the weight came off was I felt like it came off from my limbs first. So like arms and legs first. And then it started coming off like my lower back and my chest area. The last thing to come off was my lower back and my abs. Absolute last. The abs were very and this is what makes it so frustrating to people, is because, you know, you see on social media these guys and girls that just have these abs that look like they are chiseled from granite. Okay. And I wanted that. Like when in the later stages of me losing weight, I was like, man, why don't I have abs? Like I've lost, like at that point I'd lost 40 pounds or 40 or 50 pounds. I'm like, why don't I have abs? Like where's this ab thing? Right. And it wasn't until I got down to sub 10% before I actually saw my abs for the first time, like defined, like each one individually, I could see them. And, I was so pissed because like I had veins going down my obliques. So that's the muscles on the sides of your torso. I had veins. You could see veins in my obliques and I still didn't have abs. Like that's how it has to do with how you carry the fat, but it also has to do with the development of your abs. So like gymnasts and swimmers and people that have done a lot of exercises or sports, et cetera, where they're doing a lot of core bracing, they have very defined abs. Sometimes it's genetics. It's I've seen bodybuilders who are just massive dudes that are giant. They have muscles everywhere, but yet their abs are not great. They're not very defined. You know, I respect the crap out of him, but James Hollingshead is a perfect example of that. Absolute mass monster freak, but his abs are just not very defined. And so people look at that, they're like, oh, he didn't come in shape. He's in shape, believe me. He's peeled to the bone, but his abs just aren't very defined, and that's a genetic thing for him, and it sucks. Like I feel bad for him. But yeah, my abs were like the last thing to show. And even when I got down to low 7%, I still had a lot of fat on my back. Back fat for men, especially in the lower back, is like the absolute last to go. In fact, I've heard, don't even bother trying to get that fat off your lower back because you're going to start burning muscle. Basically, your body is going to say, I'm not touching that. Your muscles are the first to go. Like I've heard that's kind of a thing. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens when I get super lean here. But yeah, this one's a Rethink It, unfortunately. And just know that, you know, in order to lose fat, think of like your fat distribution as an overall bank, and you just need to lower the bank's value. Basically, you need to drain the bank account, and that will happen evenly over time. And unfortunately, you will get leaner in some areas than others. Like for example, right now, you may not be able to see it on the video, but my arms, this morning I was 199 pounds. Like I am on the precipice of 200 pounds. Now I'm probably about 4 pounds of extra water retention from the amount of stress, cortisol, and lack of sleep last night. Whenever I train legs later in the day, I can't sleep that night. My body is basically just in shock. Like, what did you just do to me? So cortisol's high. It disrupted sleep. You know, so I'm pretty hosed. So I'm 199 pounds right now, which is the heaviest I've been in like 3 years. we'll call it 2.5 years. I haven't seen 200 pounds since I've lost all my weight. Now, if you're just tuning in, I'm doing that on purpose, right? I'm in a muscle building phase. This is what I do as a aspiring bodybuilder as we go through these phases of cutting and bulking. I'm in what's called a bulk, which means I'm eating in a calorie surplus, which means I'm gaining weight with the hope that I'm gaining muscle, but with that muscle is some fat gain as well. That is unavoidable. But yeah, in my forearms, you can kind of see my forearm tendons. It's kind of hard to see right now, but yeah, I still have like a bicep vein here and stuff like that. But my midsection has gained like 2 inches. So the fat obviously is not going first to my arms; it's going to my stomach. So I'm gonna have to lose that, but that'll be the last to go whenever I lean down. Kind of sucks, but anyway. Yeah, so I think some questions that I received from comments, etc., are like, does ab work do anything for belly fat? Well, absolutely. It's exercise, right? So you're dispelling calories, you're using energy. So it's maybe not doing something for belly fat specifically, but your overall distribution of fat, it is hitting that pretty hard, provided that, again, you're in a calorie negative, meaning you're eating less than your body is using. Is that right? Eating less than your body. Yes. Yeah. Just making sure. Why does my stomach look worse in the evening than in the morning? Oh, I have this. Okay. So like in the evening, I don't know if you've ever noticed, or maybe it happens to you. If it does, put it in the comments. But for me, my lower back will get rolls in the evening. Like, especially right now when I'm heavier, I'll get these like, almost like fat rolls in my lower back, and then I'll wake up in the morning and they're gone. And the reason why is because, yeah, as we consume carbohydrate and, we're just damaging our bodies, working in the lawn, maybe we're sweating out in the heat, stuff like that, we're actually retaining water, and a lot of that water is going into those areas. So in the lower back areas where I store a lot of water, so that happens. And then in the morning, I wake up, it's gone. It's kind of an interesting thing. What about waist trainers, sauna belts, and wraps? Unfortunately, no. Those, not so much. What I will say about waist trainers and wraps, though, are they are very good. I use one to remind myself to engage my core. So as a bodybuilder, you want your waist to be rather small. So you don't want to let your abdominal muscles kind of stretch out, because that can eventually lead to having kind of a larger appearing waist. So I will use a waist wrap at times, especially when I'm doing cardio and stuff, to remind myself, engage your core. Don't let your stomach just kind of jut out. And that's especially important on stage. You get a lot of guys get criticized because these guys are eating a lot of food. Their stomachs are very distended. We're talking about 5,000-6,000 calories, some of these guys a day at least, and like 1,000 grams of carbs. That's a lot of food. So these guys, midsections tend to kind of stick out. And so that happens because they're not engaging their core. So, and it's easy to do because you're relaxed, you're chill and you're trying not to be nervous and stuff, and you're letting your kind of stomach kind of stick out. But anyway, I use that wrap to remind myself, engage your core. It's also helpful for strengthening when you engage it like that. Why do men and women hold fat in different places? That's just genetics. It's a genetic code kind of thing. I'm sure there's a more scientific reason there, but, how long until the last stubborn body fat finally goes? When you're lean enough. I think that's what sucks, is that if you're trying to lose, like, man, if I could just lose that extra little flab around my stomach. Unfortunately, there's 2 things going on there. One, you got to get real lean for that to happen. You gotta get real lean when it comes to losing that fat. And you have to, that takes some careful planning and dieting too, because you don't want to consume muscle, right? So trying to chase that last bit of fat can actually be detrimental to your health. Your body doesn't want to be low fat. Like that's against its genetic makeup. Like that's this anti-survival skill. That's bad. So it's not going to give that up easily. So you have to do extreme things in order to get that last bit of fat off. So it may not be worth it because you may be, you start to sleep worse. You could be compromising muscle. There's lots of reasons why losing that little last bit of fat. But it also could be loose skin. Like I have loose skin around my stomach. When I get real lean, I have what's called, I call it the sad belly button, because it look like my skin just droops. I mean, I'm 49 years old. So the skin I don't have the elasticity. I don't have the collagen remodeling capability of like a 20-year-old anymore. Right. So my belly skin just kind of droops a little bit. But the good news is if you lose weight over time and you keep it off and you stay hydrated, that skin will tighten a little. It won't tighten all the way, but it will tighten a little. Your skin does have some elasticity still in it. And I see that whenever I stay leaner for longer periods of time, that sad belly button gets less sad, but it's still sad. And unfortunately, the only way to correct that is through surgery, and it is a brutal surgery. Basically, they cut out strips of your skin and sew you back together. I mean, it's horrible. You got to have drains. I mean, it's terrible. All the people that I've known that have done that, they say, men at least, the men that I know who have done that, they say it's not worth it. Not for the pain you go through and the way it looks. You have scarring. It's just not good. Should I stop doing ab exercises then? No. Do ab exercise. Very important. In fact, I had a time there, especially when I was dieting, I was doing abs like 5 times a week, every morning on an empty stomach. I prefer to do my ab work on an empty stomach so that I can contract and engage them a lot easier. But I didn't notice a ton of development of my abs when I did that. But I got to think that I was probably helping myself develop my core so that whenever I go to do squats or deadlifts or one of those other compound movements that are very taxing, involve full body type things, that will help my core there. So ab work is still important. Is there anything that does target a specific area? Yeah, liposuction, which is also very painful and it can look weird. It leaves you with dents and stuff. It's not good. But anyway, all right. So that's I think I beat the dead horse on spot reduction. Got to rethink that one. Unfortunately, it kind of goes. It reminds me a lot of I'll just do high reps of weightlifting, and that will tone my muscles. It doesn't work that way. I think people think that because it's kind of like cardio at that point. If you're doing a ton of they call it not functional training, but it's stations. I think there's a word for it. I'm just forgetting it. But we're basically where you do 90 seconds and no rest between different things. Like you do pressing, then pull-ups, and then, that is actually kind of like aerobic exercise instead of anaerobic exercise. So it's kind of like cardio. So, I think that's where that toning thing came from, because you are probably burning some fat when you're doing that, because you're getting your heart rate up and doing a kind of a form of cardio. But yeah, you won't tone your muscles that way. You're just kind of doing cardio, unfortunately. Rachel, I think gravity by days. Why you carry that water? Yeah, absolutely. That is absolutely the case too, especially in your legs. Like in my, I get the sock line by the end of the day. Gravity definitely plays in. Like if I kick my feet up for an hour or two, it'll be gone. So absolutely, gravity definitely affects where that water goes in our body. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't have a scientific reason for it, but I know it because we'll look backstage at bodybuilders right before they go out on the stage. A lot of those guys will have their legs up, and it's to try to get some of that inflammation and fluid out of their legs so they don't look washed out. Yeah. All right. So what other questions do y'all have? What other questions do y'all have? Or topics you want to see me cover? That's always a good one. I had somebody, while I'm waiting for questions to come in, I had somebody ask me, hey, for arthritis, is there anything that I can do with my diet for arthritis? And I think it depends on the type of arthritis you have. If it's like a cartilage breakdown kind of thing, not so much for something like that. I can't remember which one is rheumatoid and which one's osteo. But if yours is caused by inflammation, if you're having arthritis as from inflammation, antioxidants or anti-inflammatory foods can help reduce that. So, a lower carb diet, not keto, because keto doesn't allow you to eat things like blueberries and other, and cocoa and stuff like that. It doesn't allow you to eat those in a true keto form. And those have antioxidants in them. Those foods have antioxidants in them. So berries and things like that have them in there. So by going keto, you're not allowing yourself to eat the antioxidant type foods. There might be some for keto, but I'm not sure. But I tend to go to things like blueberries and 100% cocoa, non-alkali processed cocoa for polyphenols, which are antioxidants, and help kind of reduce some of that systemic inflammation. So that's one thing you can do with your diet, is you can kind of cut your carbs down a little bit, definitely clean it up. Like if you're eating a lot of processed sugars and stuff, cut that crap out and move to eating, some blueberries and other highly antioxidant type food. You can also incorporate things like ubiquinol, etc., antioxidant supplementation as well. So that's one question I did get on the side. All right. What other questions do y'all have? Let's see. Oh, yeah, lowering cortisol in future talks. Yeah, so definitely, that's definitely an interesting one. It's something that I think, Rach, it's like to me, lowering cortisol is like a big state of mind thing. Obviously, there are things that raise our cortisol, like exercise raise our cortisol. So some cortisol elevation is okay. It's a good thing. It's a body's natural response. But being overly stressed, not sleeping, not eating very well, those types of things can also raise cortisol, which are controllable things. And for me, it's stress. Like I let things, very, very small things, stress me out. And I tend to obsess over very small things. And that's just stuff like a lot of the most successful bodybuilders are guys that are just totally chill. And then people say this about professional athletes too. Like they're like, dude, they're some of the laziest people you've ever seen. Not from like they don't do anything, but like after their training, they just sit there and chill or play games or sleep. And they're really good at basically like decompressing. And, that's a good way to flush cortisol, right? But cortisol, it's too much cortisol, I would say, is bad. Some cortisol is normal because that's part of our fight flight stuff, right? So you're not going to be able to completely get rid of cortisol. It's a natural thing. It exists in our body for a reason, but too much of it for a sustained period of time is not a good thing. And so that frame of mind stuff, antioxidants, taking care of yourself, getting enough sleep, state of mind, meditation, I think is really important. I wish I did it, but I need to get in the habit of doing it. But just, recentering myself and trying to block out things that are negative and just have an overall better positive look at life. These are all things that I need to work on and probably be working on the rest of my life. But anyway, hopefully that's enough information about cortisol. But, maybe I'll do a post about it or something. I'll do like a deep dive. I'll do a medical kind of deep dive, technical breakup of it. And we'll get it figured out. But, yeah. Yeah, as bodybuilders, or even like power lifters and professional athletes or athletes of any kind, cortisol is like a constant state of being. Like that's always going to be high after training, et cetera. So you got to find ways to expel that. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I'm an anxious person. I have high anxiety. So, yeah. I feel your pain. Hey, Eddie, what's going on, man? Thanks for joining. Oh, man. All right. All right. Well, it looks like that's it. I don't see any other questions here. So I'm gonna wrap it up there. But remember, if you have questions, put them in the comments here. Drop them on our Facebook page, our LinkedIn, which is in the, I think it's in the channel description. You can find the LinkedIn, has all the links. So, and you could put a comment anywhere. You could put it in Instagram or Facebook or YouTube or we're even on TikTok. You can put it in all those places, and you can send it to either me personally or Ironspire Health. Either one works, and I'm happy to cover it. Happy to answer the questions. If you like the kind of information I'm sharing here, and you want to pick my brain about something, sign up for a 20-minute free consultation session. Happy to help you with whatever's on your mind. If you find this content super helpful, subscribe. That would really help me out, or even just leave a comment in the video. That helps kind of boost it in the algorithm, more engagement. YouTube seems to like that. So it'll put those videos kind of higher up in the list. So leave a comment or even just thumbs up, like the video. That's helpful too. But yeah, I think this was a good one today. It was a very interesting topic. I love reading these studies about how these experiments that these scientists do to prove or disprove theories. And I read more than just the abstracts. The abstract has kind of one part of it, but if you read the whole thing about how they did it, et cetera, it's pretty fascinating stuff. If you've never done that, I would encourage you to do that. So I'll put those in the description so you can read about them. But hey, if you're on your health journey, keep up the great work. I know you can do it, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks a lot.